Poor girl saves badly injured millionaire and his horse. The reason will shock you. She rescues him with the little she has, not imagining who he really is. When the truth comes to light, everything she believed crumbles. But it's the choice she makes afterward that will change the desert forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The sun burned mercilessly over the Arizona desert. Annie, a 12-year-old girl with eyes as deep as water wells and dark hair braided with faded ribbons, walked among twisted shrubs, collecting twigs and roots. Since losing her parents to the Great Drought 3 years ago, she had survived alone in a small wooden cabin her father had built before passing. "Today has to be productive," she murmured to herself as her calloused hands picked wild, prickly pears. The sky began to change, not with rain clouds, but with a strange commotion. Annie raised her eyes and spotted, silhouetted against the golden horizon, a white horse galloping disoriented. Its coat gleamed like silver under the relentless sun. On top of it, a man dressed in clothes that were once elegant swayed, almost falling. Blood stained his once white shirt. The horse stopped a few yards from her, as if it had found its destination. The man slid from his mount, falling heavily onto the cracked earth. "Help," he mumbled before losing consciousness. Annie hesitated. She knew the dangers of trusting strangers, but something about that man, perhaps the vulnerability she never imagined seeing in someone who clearly came from a world of privilege, made her act. With effort, she dragged him to her cabin, leaving her trail in the dust. In the modest shelter, she washed his wounds with water she preciously kept in a clay pot. The man was approximately 50 years old, with well-cut grey hair and hands without calluses, hands that had never known hard work. When he finally awoke, his blue eyes stared at the thatched roof in confusion. Where am I?" he asked, in a hoarse voice. "In my house," Annie answered simply, offering him water in a gourd. "Who are you, sir?" The man swallowed with difficulty both the water and the question. "August Mitchell," he finally answered. "I need to leave." He tried to get up, but the pain made him retreat. "You're too hurt to leave," Annie stated. "Your horse needs to rest too." August looked through the improvised window and saw the magnificent white animal tied under the rare shade of a dry tree. "Neptune," he murmured. "At least he's okay." In the days that followed, while August regained his strength, Annie shared with him the little she had, a thin soup of roots, fresh water from the only well that hadn't completely dried up, and simple stories about life in the desert. He in turn remained reserved, as if carrying a secret too heavy to share. On the fourth night, however, when the fever returned to attack him, August began to rave. "I don't want any more. Don't destroy. The lands aren't mine," he mumbled, fidgeting on the mat that served as a bed. Annie placed a damp cloth on his forehead and observed his face contorted by what seemed to be not just physical pain, but an inner torment. It was then that she noticed something that had escaped before, a small gold medallion hanging from his neck, hidden under his shirt. On it, engraved in elegant letters, was the name New Hope Ranch. "What did you do, Mr. August?" she whispered. To the unconscious man. "Who are you running from?" Outside, Neptune whinnied as if answering the unasked question. In the vastness of the starry desert sky, the moon illuminated a path that Annie still couldn't see, a path that connected her past of losses to the mysterious man that destiny had placed under her care. What she didn't know was that this encounter would forever change not just her life, but the future of an entire community that had long waited for justice. Morning arrived with the promise of another scorching day. August woke up startled, his breathing labored. The fever had subsided, but the weight of memories remained. "You talked a lot while you were sleeping," said Annie, sitting next to the mat, braiding straw with nimble fingers. August adjusted, himself uncomfortably. "And what did I say?" "You talked about lands, about destruction, said you were sorry." Annie looked directly into his eyes. "You own that ranch, don't you? New Hope." The man paled, instinctively touching the medallion. On his chest. How do you know that? It's on your neck, she pointed to the medallion. And everyone around these parts knows New Hope. That's where they kicked out many families 2 years ago, including my parents' friends. Silence weighed between them like an unspoken accusation. Outside, Neptune whinnied, impatient. I didn't know, August began, but interrupted himself. No, that's a lie. I knew, but I didn't want to see. I let my foreman Julian take care of those details. The last word came out bitter from his mouth. Annie continued braiding the straw, now with more force. And now you're running because someone found out. August took a deep breath. Julian and other employees turned against me. I discovered they weren't just evicting people, but also threatening them. He swallowed hard. When I confronted Julian, he said I always turned a blind eye, that I signed all the papers without reading, and he was right. Annie stood up, her small hands in fists. And you think that excuses you? No. The answer came quick and firm. There's no excuse. I just tried to fix things too late. I ordered all families to be located and compensated. That's when they attacked me. Julian has many interests in those lands that go beyond my business. The girl walked to the small window. The desert stretched out, golden and relentless before her. My parents died because they lost everything, not from hunger or thirst, but from heartbreak. They loved this land. August lowered his head. I can't bring your parents back, but I can try to repair the harm I caused. How? The question was simple, but loaded with challenge. Help me stand up. He tried to rise with difficulty. I need to show you something. Leaning on Annie, August stumbled to Neptune. From one of the bags attached to the saddle, he retrieved a worn leather folder. Here are all the land documents. Deeds, maps, contracts. And this, he took out a small notebook, is where I wrote down the name of each family that was evicted, and where they possibly are now. Annie looked at the papers, perplexed. You were really going to return the lands? Yes, but Julian found out. He has powerful partners in New York who invested millions in expanding the ranch. August ran his hand over his tired face. They're looking for me, I'm sure. The girl was silent for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. I propose a deal, Mr. August. 7 days. You have 7 days to prove to me that you can really change, to start fixing what you did. And after that, Annie's eyes, normally sweet, hardened with wisdom beyond her years. If you're lying, I'll personally hand you over to Julian. If you're telling the truth, well, we'll see. August extended his trembling hand. That's fair. I accept your challenge, Annie. They shook hands, sealing a pact that neither knew exactly where it would lead them. Neptune watched attentively, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Where do we start? Asked August. Annie pointed to the horizon where a small cluster of houses could be seen in the distance. Over there, Soul Valley. That's where many ended up after they lost their lands, including Mr. Jeremy, who lost his son during the eviction. He needs to hear what you have to say. The sun was beginning to tilt in the sky when they departed. August mounted on Neptune, Annie walking beside, guiding them along a trail almost erased by time and forgetfulness. The first day of the pact had begun. Soul Valley didn't live up to its name. It looked more like a heap of ruins than a living community. Poorly maintained adobe houses, some without roofs, others with just the walls standing, like skeletons exposed to the sun. Barefoot children ran among skinny chickens, while adults with empty gazes sat in the scarce shadows. The arrival of Annie with a man mounted on a white horse caused immediate commotion. A group began to form around them. "It's him!" shouted a middle-aged woman pointing at August. "It's the man from the ranch." Hostile murmurs grew like waves. August dismounted, feeling the pain in his body intensify with the movement, but remained firm. "I came to speak with Mr. Jeremy," he said, his voice calmer than he felt. A tall man with skin darkened by the sun and eyes that carried a deep sadness made his way through the crowd. His grey hair contrasted with his still proud posture, despite the adversities. "That's me." The voice was grave, cutting. "What do you want here, Mitchell? Wasn't it enough to take our lands? Have you come to see the misery you caused? Annie stepped forward. Mr. Jeremy, he came because I brought him. He has something important to tell you, to all of you. Jeremy crossed his arms, distrustful. Speak up then, before we decide what to do with you. August took a deep breath, feeling the gazes of dozens of people upon him, people whose lives he had helped destroy with his negligence and greed. I came to return what's rightfully yours. He opened the folder he carried and took out the documents. These are the deeds. To the lands that were taken from you, I'm here to officially return them and offer compensation for the damages caused. An astonished silence set in, soon replaced by dry and incredulous laughter. And why would you do this now? Asked an elderly woman with white hair, leaning on an improvised cane. What changed, rich man? Mrs. Clara, his son is sick, answered a man from the back. They say he'll only survive with a transplant. Must be trying to clear his conscience before it's too late. I don't have children, interrupted August. I never married. The ranch and money were my only family until I realized what I caused. Jeremy stepped forward, facing him closely. And that foreman of yours, Julian, he agreed to this. It was him who... Jeremy choked on the words. It was him who pushed my boy off the cliff when we tried to resist. August paled. Julian and other employees turned against me when I tried to undo the harm. They're the ones who left me like this. He pointed to his wounds. They're looking for me. But I didn't come asking for protection. I came to fulfill my part. Annie, who was observing attentively, intervened. Mr. Jeremy, I proposed a deal to him. 7 days to prove he's telling the truth. If he's lying, we'll hand him over to Julian ourselves. And why should we believe him? Questioned Mrs. Clara. Words are wind, girl, and we're already full of wind around here. Because he brought this. Annie pointed to Neptune, who remained calm despite the tension. This horse is worth more than everything we have in this village. He could have fled, sold the animal, and started over somewhere else. But he's here. A young man of approximately 20, thin with dark and intense eyes, made his way to the front. My name is Ralph, he said, facing August. My father died of heartbreak after we lost our land. That land had been in our family for generations. August held the young man's gaze. Your name is in my notebook, Ralph. Your family had the property at the bend of the dry creek, right? The young man seemed surprised. How do you know that? Because I studied each case before coming. I know what I took from each of you. And I know that no amount of money can fully compensate, but it's a start. Jeremy still didn't seem convinced. And what exactly are you proposing? August looked at Annie, as if seeking courage in the girl's eyes, and then spoke. A cooperative. Not just returning the lands, but unifying them under shared management. Everyone decides together, everyone benefits together. I want to provide capital to reactivate production, build irrigation systems, bring technology. But I don't want to control anything. I want to participate only as one more member. A murmur spread through the crowd. The proposal was too bold to be accepted immediately, but audacious enough to awaken something that hadn't been seen in those eyes for a long time, a glimmer of hope. We'll discuss this, Jeremy finally said. But know that we're watching you, Mitchell. One false step and Julian will be the least of your problems. Annie smiled discreetly. The first day had ended better than she expected, but there were still 6 left, and the path to redemption was just beginning. The morning of the second day arrived with an unexpected decision. Jeremy, after a night of deliberations with the older residents of the village, offered August and Annie shelter in a small abandoned house at the edge of the community. It's not out of kindness, he explained, as he guided them through the village. It's to keep you under our eyes. Besides, if Julian shows up around here, we want to be prepared. The house was simple, a single room with a dirt floor, adobe walls cracked by time, and a roof that betrayed leaks. For Annie, however, it was more than she had in recent years. There's space to plant out there, she observed, looking through the glassless window. You like plants? Asked August, surprised by the girl's enthusiasm. My father was the best farmer in these parts. He knew how to make life sprout even in the most ungrateful soil. Her eyes shone with the memory. He always said that where there's a root, there's hope. August smiled for the first time since he arrived. Then let's start there, let's plant something. In the morning, while the village was still waking up, August and Annie began to clean the small plot next to the house. He, still weakened by his wounds, worked more slowly but with determination. She, agile and knowledgeable about the desert, indicated the best places to dig, where moisture remained even in drought. Ralph, the young man who had lost his father, observed from a distance, suspicious. After a few hours, he approached. "This won't change what you did," he said to August without beating around the bush. "I know," August replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Nothing can change the past, but perhaps we can build a different future." Ralph crossed his arms. "Why should we believe you? Men like you only care about money." August put down the improvised hoe and faced the young man. "You're right. For almost my entire life, I only cared about profits. I lived alone without family, accumulating wealth that never brought true happiness." He paused, looking at his own hands, now dirty with soil. "But sometimes you need to lose everything to see what really matters." Ralph didn't respond immediately. His eyes burned with grief, but there was also curiosity. "What do you have in mind with this cooperative?" Annie approached, carrying seeds she had gotten from Mrs. Clara. "Tell him, Mr. August, the idea is good." August sat on a rock, feeling the pain in his muscles from the unusual effort. "I imagine all the properties unified, but not under my control. A shared management, where each family has a voice in decisions. We can start with modern drip irrigation systems that save up to 60% of water compared to traditional methods, use planting techniques that work even in dry regions, create direct sales cooperatives to eliminate middlemen." "And where would the money for this come from?" interrupted Ralph, skeptical. "From selling my other properties. I have apartments in New York, a beach house, investments. Everything will be converted to this project." Ralph let out a bitter laugh. "And why would you do that? Are you going to tell me you had a divine revelation?" "No." August looked at Annie, who was carefully planting the seeds. "I had a human revelation when I saw this girl sharing with me the little she had, while I, with all my money, never shared anything with anyone." The silence that followed was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Clara, leaning on her improvised cane. "August Mitchell," she called, her voice trembling with age but firm in intention. "I want to show you something." Intrigued, August followed the old woman to a small construction in the center of the village. It was a kind of improvised memorial, with photos, personal objects, and names written on wood. "Each name here," explained Mrs. Clara, "is someone we lost after we were evicted, some from disease without medicine, others," she hesitated, "from deep sadness. This one," she pointed to a portrait of a smiling young man, "was Jeremy's son. He was only 17. August felt the weight of those lives on his shoulders. Each face, each name was a testimony of his complicity, even if by omission. "This isn't to make you feel guilty," continued the old woman, surprising him. "It's so you understand the size of your commitment. If you really want reparation, it's not about money or land. It's about returning dignity to these people." "How can I do that?" he asked, genuinely lost. "By starting to listen." Mrs. Clara smiled, revealing few teeth. "Tonight we'll have a meeting. Everyone will tell their stories and you will listen, without interrupting, without trying to justify yourself. Just listen." When August returned to the small garden, he found Ralph helping Annie with the planting. The young man didn't say anything, but his look had subtly changed. "He's going to help us," explained Annie, radiant. "Ralph knows medicinal plants that can grow even with little water." August nodded, grateful. In the distance, Neptune grazed peacefully, as if he knew that there, in that forgotten piece of desert, something important was beginning to sprout, as fragile as the newly planted seeds, but equally full of potential. The second day was ending. The night would bring painful stories, and perhaps the beginning of a deeper understanding. For August, each hour was a step on the path of redemption that he was beginning to realize would be much longer and more arduous than he had imagined. Night fell like a heavy cloak over Soul Valley. Under the flickering light of lanterns and fires, the residents gathered in a circle in the central square. Some brought small wooden stools, others sat directly on the ground. Children ran around, ignoring the solemnity of the moment. while the adults maintained grave expressions. August sat on a small bench that Ralph had offered him, a small but significant gesture. Annie remained by his side like an improvised guardian. Jeremy spoke first. "We're here so August Mitchell can know our stories, so he can know exactly what he caused when he signed those papers without reading, when he turned his back on others' suffering." His eyes met August's, "and so we can decide whether we believe in his proposal for reparation." One by one, the residents began to speak. Stories of generations living on the land, of interrupted traditions, of shattered dreams. Mrs. Clara told about the medicinal herbs she cultivated, knowledge passed down by her grandmother, lost when she had to hastily abandon her yard. A man named Sebastian narrated how his wife, 8 months pregnant, gave birth prematurely during the forced flight, and how the baby, without adequate assistance, fought for days before succumbing. The stories continued throughout the night. Some drew tears, others provoked nods of recognition among residents who had shared those experiences. August listened to each one without interrupting, as he had promised Mrs. Clara. His face, once a mask of business control, now revealed every emotion the narratives evoked. Finally, it was Jeremy's turn. The man rose slowly as if carrying an invisible weight. "My son Michael was 17. His voice was low, forcing everyone to pay attention. "He was born and raised on our land. He knew every piece, every tree, every bend in the creek. When Julian and his men arrived with the eviction orders, Michael refused to leave." Jeremy paused, taking a deep breath. "He climbed up the cliff that divided our property and shouted that nobody would take us away. Julian ordered 2 men to grab him. In the confusion, or perhaps intentionally, he fell from the cliff, hit his head on the rocks. The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut." August closed his eyes, as if trying to push away the mental image of that scene. "We buried Michael by the creek, on the land he loved so much. Afterward, we were forced to leave him behind." Jeremy wiped away a solitary tear. "I could never go back to visit his grave." When everyone had finished, a profound silence took over the meeting. It was Annie who broke it. "Does Mr. August have something to say?" August stood up with difficulty. His legs trembled, not just from his physical wounds, but from the emotional weight of the stories he had just heard. "I have no words that can undo what was done." His voice was choked. "I didn't come to ask forgiveness because I know some wounds are too deep to be forgiven. I came to offer actions, not words." He took a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to Jeremy. "This is an official document transferring all the lands of New Hope Ranch to a cooperative to be formed by you. It's already signed by me. All that's left is to define the terms you consider fair." Jeremy examined the document with suspicion. "What about your partners, those investors from New York?" "They aren't legal partners, just financiers. The property is entirely in my name." August paused. "So of course they'll come after me when they find out, but that's my problem, not yours." Ralph, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "What if we call this Cooperative Michael, in memory of Jeremy's son and all those we lost?" A murmur of approval ran through the group. Jeremy, visibly moved, just nodded. "We need more than papers," said Mrs. Clara. "We need to see concrete actions." "And you will," August assured. "Tomorrow we'll start with the artesian well. I have sufficient resources to begin the works immediately." The meeting dissolved slowly, with small groups forming to discuss the developments. August, emotionally and physically exhausted, walked back to the small house with Annie. "How do you feel?" asked the girl as she lit a lantern inside the dark room. August sat on the improvised mat that served as a bed, like someone who lived an entire life with a blindfold and suddenly sees reality. He looked at his hands, now calloused from that day's work. "I'm ashamed of who I was, Annie, and scared of what I still have to do to fix everything." The girl smiled, with wisdom that transcended her age. "My father used to say that fear is only bad when it paralyzes us. When it makes us act, it becomes courage." Outside, Neptune whinnied, as if agreeing. The 3rd day was approaching, bringing even greater challenges and the promise of a transformation that none of them could fully imagine. The third day dawned with a different energy in Soul Valley. Even before the sun had fully risen on the horizon, a small group was already gathering around August, who was explaining about drilling the artesian well. "The water is down there. We just need to reach it," he was saying, pointing to an improvised map drawn in the dirt. "With the right equipment, we can have running water throughout the village in a few days." Ralph, who had now unofficially assumed the role of mediator between August and the community, seemed skeptical. "And how are we going to get that equipment here, in the middle of the desert?" August smiled. "I have contacts. If you'll allow Hammy to use a phone." Jeremy, who was observing from a distance, approached. "There's a phone at Tommy's grocery store in the neighboring village. It's a 2-hour walk from here." "I can go with Neptune," August offered. "I'll be back before noon." "I'll go with him," Annie promptly said, "to make sure he comes back." The distrust still lingered, but less intensely. August mounted Neptune, helping Annie climb up behind him, and they departed under the watchful gaze of the residents. The walk to the village was initially silent. The sun was gaining strength, and the arid landscape of the desert revealed its austere beauty. Flowering cacti, colorful lizards running between rocks, the sky of such an intense blue, it seemed unreal. "Mr. August," called Annie, breaking the silence, "why did you never marry?" The question caught him by surprise. "I think I always put business first." He reflected for a moment. "Or maybe I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of not knowing how to love properly." The answer came out more sincere than he intended. "My parents were cold people, Annie. We related like business partners, not family. I think I learned from them to value success more than feelings." The girl remained silent, processing the information. "And you? Don't you want to know about my parents?" she finally asked. "I do, very much." Annie adjusted herself in the saddle, remembering. "My father was Joshua Newfield, my mother, Claire. They didn't have much land, but what they had, they cared for, with love. Dad knew how to make anything sprout from that ground. Mom made prickly pear jams that she sold at the Tucson market." Her voice broke slightly. "When they lost their land, they tried to start over here, but it was hard. One day, Dad woke up with a high fever. We had no medicine, no money for a doctor in town. Mom stayed by his side until the end. After that, she just faded away, like a candle without a flame." August felt a lump in his throat. "I'm sorry, Annie. Deeply sorry. It wasn't you who took our lands directly. It was a man named Arnold Cooper. He bought many small properties and sold them to New Hope." August briefly closed his eyes, recognizing the name. "Arnold was one of my land buyers. I knew. I should have investigated how he managed to get so many properties at such low prices." They arrived at the small village where a modest grocery store stood out among the few buildings. While August made the necessary calls, Annie waited outside, petting Neptune. The horse, normally reserved with strangers, seemed to have developed a special affection for the girl. Back at Soul Valley, they found an unexpected commotion. Her dusty car was parked at the entrance to the community, and people were gathering around it. "Who is it?" Annie asked a running boy. "A woman from the city. Says she's the rich man's daughter." August paled. He hurried to the center of the village, where an elegant woman, approximately 35 years old, was gesturing excitedly. "Helen?" he called, incredulous. The woman turned, her eyes flashing with anger. "Finally, Dad." The term sounded like an accusation. "I had to track your credit card to find you. What do you think you're doing?" The residents observed the scene, surprised. August had said he had no children. "She's not my biological daughter," he quickly explained, sensing the confusion. "Helen is the daughter of a former employee who passed away. I raised her since she was 10. "Raised me?" Helen laughed bitterly. "You sent me to expensive boarding schools so you wouldn't have to deal with me. And when you needed to display a perfect family to your partners, you'd pick me up for business dinners." Jeremy approached, suspicious. "What does she want here?" Helen adjusted her impeccably arranged hair. "I came to prevent my adoptive father from committing financial suicide." She stared at August. "Julian contacted me, told me about your late bout of conscience. You're about to throw away a fortune because of guilt, after everything you built." It's not guilt, Helen, it's justice, August remained firm. And it's not a fortune I'm losing, it's a chance to do something that really matters. You've gone crazy, she shook her head, incredulous. The investors are furious. They're threatening to sue you for breach of contract. Your reputation in the market is destroyed. Annie, who was observing the scene, stepped forward. Your father is trying to fix what he did wrong. That's not crazy. Helen looked at the girl with disdain. And who are you, another charity case he found to make himself feel better? She's my conscience, August replied, placing his hand on Annie's shoulder. The conscience I should have had all my life. Helen examined her adoptive father more carefully, noting his wounds, his simple clothes, his now calloused hands. You're really serious. It wasn't a question, but an astonished realization. What happened to you? August looked around at the faces marked by hard life, at Annie by his side, at Neptune peacefully grazing in the distance. I woke up, Helen. I finally woke up. The afternoon advanced, and with it the third day of the 7-day pact. Helen's arrival brought a new complication, an unexpected test for August's determination. The sun was beginning its descent on the horizon, casting elongated shadows over Soul Valley, where seeds of change were already beginning to germinate in the previously sterile soil. The morning of the 4th day brought the roar of heavy engines breaking the usual silence of Soul Valley. 2 large trucks parked at the entrance to the community, bringing equipment for drilling the artesian well and men to operate it. The news spread quickly, and soon almost all the residents gathered to see the arrival of what many called a miracle. August, despite the tense confrontation with Helen the day before, appeared energized. He coordinated the workers with a natural authority, but different from that of the ruthless businessman he once was. Now he consulted the older residents about the best location for drilling, listened to their stories about where water used to be more abundant, respected traditional knowledge. Helen observed everything from a distance, leaning against her car, an indecipherable expression on her face. She had decided to stay, claiming she needed to see how far this madness goes. But Annie suspected there was more behind that decision. Your adoptive father is really changing, commented the girl, approaching Helen with 2 mugs of coffee. Helen accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. He's not my father. Not really. Her eyes didn't leave August, who was now animatedly talking with Jeremy about the water distribution system. I was just a moral obligation to him, a charity project, like all of you. Annie sat beside her on the car hood, her legs swinging carelessly. You know, I thought that's all it was at first too, but there's something different about him now. Helen took a sip of the coffee, making a face at the strength of the drink. August Mitchell has always been an obsessed man. Before it was with money and power, now it's with redemption. The obsession has just changed form. Or maybe he's found something that really matters, Annie countered. Something bigger than himself. The woman looked at the girl with curiosity. How old are you? 12, almost 13. You talk like someone much older. Annie smiled. Losing everything early makes you grow up fast. The two remained silent for a few moments, observing the frantic activity around the drill that was beginning to be assembled. My mother worked as a housekeeper in his home, Helen said suddenly. When she got sick, August paid for the best. Doctors, but it didn't help. On her deathbed, she asked him to take care of me. He fulfilled the promise to the letter, but always keeping his distance. Helen sighed. I learned early on that his money was the only thing I really had from him. And now he's giving up that money, Annie concluded. Exactly. Helen finished her coffee. It's like he's giving up the only language we knew how to speak to each other. In the afternoon, the equipment was ready. August gathered everyone around the drilling site for a moment he called symbolic. This water isn't just to quench thirst, he said. It's to nourish a new beginning. The Michael Cooperative will be built on 3 pillars: water, land, and dignity. He paused, seeking the gaze of each person present. I don't want you to see this as charity or compensation. It's restitution. It's justice. Jeremy, who had moderated his hostility in recent days, stepped forward. And where do you Fit in this cooperative, Mitchell? What will be your role? The question hung in the air. Everyone waited for the answer. Helen, who had approached, crossed her arms, equally curious. I'll be just another member, without privileges, without special authority. August took a crumpled paper from his pocket. This is a draft of the cooperative's bylaws that I've been drawing up. It provides for decisions by assembly, equal distribution of profits, priority investment in education and health. But it's you who should finalize and approve it. He handed the document to Jeremy, who examined it carefully. Seems too good to be true, the man commented, still suspicious. The truth, Mr. Jeremy, is that I've never been as happy as I have been these days, working with my own hands, seeing direct results from my effort. August looked at Annie and, surprisingly, at Helen. I found something that money never gave me: purpose. The drill began its work with a rumble, boring into the parched soil in search of the underground treasure. The operation would take hours, perhaps days, but hope was palpable. While the machine worked, life in the village continued. Ralph organized a group to clean and prepare the land where the cooperative's headquarters would be built. Mrs. Clara began planning a community garden with medicinal plants. Children ran around, infected by the adults' excitement. In the late Tijuana afternoon, Helen surprised everyone by taking several boxes of school supplies, basic medications, and seeds out of her car. I found them in August's office, she explained to Annie while unloading. He had been planning this for some time, apparently. You're helping, the girl observed, smiling. Helen shrugged but couldn't completely hide a smile. Let's say I'm curious to see where this leads. At night, sitting around a fire, August, Annie, Helen, and some residents talked about the next steps. The mood was one of cautious optimism. Tomorrow, the agricultural engineer will arrive, August informed. He'll bring drip irrigation projects that save up to 60% of water compared to traditional methods. What about Julian? Asked Ralph, voicing the concern many had. He won't just give up. The question brought tension to the group. Helen was the one who answered. Julian has already mobilized the investors. They're preparing legal measures. Let them come, said August with a confidence that surprised everyone. I have documents that prove how the lands were illegally acquired. If they want a public battle, they'll get one, but I doubt they want that kind of exposure. The night advanced, and with it, the fourth day came to an end. More than half of the 7-day pact had already passed, and the transformations were visible both in the village and in the people. August, who days before was seen as an enemy, was now treated with growing respect. Helen, initially skeptical, was beginning to get involved in the project, and Annie, the little orphan who had started it all, watched with bright eyes as the seeds of hope sprouted around her. Neptune, always attentive, grazed under the starry sky, like a silent guardian of that unlikely union of destinies. The dawn of the 7th day arrived with the news everyone had been waiting for. Water. After almost 3 days of continuous drilling, the equipment finally reached an underground aquifer. A crystalline jet gushed from the earth, causing shouts of joy and even tears among the older residents of Soul Valley. Annie ran to wake August, who had spent the night keeping vigil beside the equipment and had fallen asleep, sitting, leaning, against a tree. Mr. August, we did it. The girl was practically dancing with enthusiasm. He woke up dazed, but soon understood the reason for the euphoria. With Annie's help, he stood up and walked to the spot where a small crowd was already forming around the newly drilled well. Jeremy, with an improvised cup, was the first to taste the water. It's fresh and clean. His eyes shone. Better than any water I've ever tasted. Helen, who was watching from the side, approached August. Congratulations, she said with surprising sincerity. You really did it. We did it, he corrected, including everyone with a gesture. And this is just the beginning. The rest of the morning was dedicated to installing the pump and the initial distribution system. The agricultural engineer, who had arrived the day before, coordinated the work, explaining to the residents how the system would function and teaching them basic maintenance. Around noon, a meeting was called in the center of the village. It was time to officially establish the Michael Cooperative. August, wearing the same simple clothes of the last few days, but with renewed dignity, presented the final bylaws that had been reviewed by everyone in previous days. From today, he announced, these lands officially belong to the cooperative. Each family will have the right to a plot for their own cultivation, in addition to participation in collective projects. Decisions will be made in monthly assemblies, where each adult member has the right to one vote, regardless of the size of their land or contribution. A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. "And what about you?" asked a voice from the back. "What do you get out of this?" August smiled, not offended by the distrust. "I get the chance to start over, to be part of something bigger than myself." He paused. "If you'll accept me, I'd like to stay and work alongside you. Without privileges, just as another member of the community." The proposal generated immediate discussion. Some still had reservations, others defended the idea. It was Jeremy who silenced everyone with a gesture. "August Mitchell," he said, with a grave voice, "you caused a lot of suffering, directly or indirectly. That can't be forgotten." August nodded, accepting the judgment. "But," continued Jeremy, "in these 7 days you've demonstrated more than repentance. You've demonstrated commitment to change." He extended his hand. "The Michael Cooperative accepts you as a member on equal terms with all of us." The two men shook hands, sealing a pact that went far beyond that moment. The rest of the day was celebration. A large communal meal was organized with the little that each family could offer, transformed into abundance through sharing. Improvised music echoed through the village, and even the most skeptical allowed themselves to smile. Annie, sitting in the shade with Helen, observed everything with satisfaction. "Your father is a good man deep down," she commented. "He just needed to remember that." Helen, who had softened her stance in recent days, sighed. "Maybe. Or maybe he just found people who made him want to be better." She looked at Annie with curiosity. "What will you do now, Annie? Will you continue living alone?" The girl didn't have time to answer. August approached, sitting down beside them. "I've been thinking about that," he said, as if he had heard the question. "Annie, if you want, I'd like to formalize your guardianship. Not to take you away from here, but to ensure you have access to education, health, everything you deserve, while we continue here, building the cooperative." Annie widened her eyes, surprised. Like a father. Like someone who cares deeply about you and wants to ensure your well-being. August smiled. "You've taught me more in these 7 days than I learned in my entire life." Helen observed the interaction with teary eyes, perhaps remembering her own history with August. "And you, Helen?" he asked, turning to his adoptive daughter. "I know we have a complicated history. I failed you in many ways, but if you're willing, I'd like to try to build something new. A real relationship, not based on obligation or money." Helen didn't respond immediately. Years of emotional distance aren't resolved in a few days. But there was an opening, a possibility that didn't exist before. "I'll stay a few more days," she finally said, "to help with the initial organization of the cooperative. After that, we'll see." It was more than August expected, and his smile showed it. The sun was beginning to set when an alert spread through the village. Cars were approaching. 3 dusty vehicles parked at the entrance to the community. From one of them, Julian stepped out, accompanied by 2 men in suits, clearly out of place in the rural environment. "I knew I'd find you here," said Julian, approaching the central group where August was. "I came to get what belongs to me." A tense silence set in. August stepped forward, but it was Ralph who spoke. "Nothing here belongs to you, Julian. This land now belongs to the Michael Cooperative." Julian laughed mockingly. "Cooperative? Is that what you're calling this farce?" He turned to August. "These men are lawyers for the investors. They came with a final proposal. Either you reverse this madness or you'll be sued for fraud and breach of contract." August remained calm. "Tell your investors I have all the documents proving how the lands were illegally acquired." His voice was firm. "If they want to take this further, I'm prepared. The press would love the story of the big businessman who exploited poor families in the desert." The lawyers exchanged worried looks. One of them pulled Julian aside, starting a heated discussion. Meanwhile, the residents of Soul Valley formed a protective circle around August and Annie. Jeremy stepped forward. "This land is ours now, Julian. By right and by justice. You can bring lawyers, you can bring the police, you can bring the army. We won't leave here." The determination in his voice was unequivocal. Julian, realizing he was at a disadvantage, retreated. "This isn't over, Mitchell," he threatened, before returning to the car with the lawyers. When the vehicles moved away, raising dust, a collective sigh of relief ran through the community. August looked at everyone around him. Annie, with her precocious wisdom, Helen beginning to open her hardened heart, Jeremy finding strength to lead again, Ralph representing the promising future, Mrs. Clara, guardian of memory and traditions, and Neptune, the magnificent white horse that had brought him there, as if he knew exactly where he needed to be. In the distance, dark clouds were beginning to form on the horizon. After years of drought, the desert was finally receiving the promise of rain. It was as if nature itself was celebrating the rebirth of that piece of land and the souls that inhabited it. "Look!" exclaimed Annie, pointing to the sky. "It's going to rain." The first drops began to fall, timid, soon transforming into a generous rain that washed away the dust, nourished the soil, and renewed hope. No one ran for shelter. Everyone remained there, faces raised, feeling the water from the sky mix with tears of joy. August, holding hands with Annie and Helen, felt something he had never experienced in all his years of wealth and power: belonging. There, in that once forgotten desert, now reborn, he had finally found his true home. The rain continued to fall on Soul Valley, now renamed the Michael Cooperative, marking not the end of a journey but the beginning of a new story. A story of redemption, reconstruction, and, above all, hope that, like water on dry land, makes even the most arid souls bloom. And in the sky, a